Hello, it's Jenny here from the A to Z of Emotional Health Online Library. I am delighted to be joined by Julian Hall from The Calm People. I've been having conversations with men about emotions and feelings, finding out how easy it is for guys to have an emotional voice, whether from a personal perspective, a professional perspective, from a cultural perspective. They feel that that is okay. It's been fascinating to hear where guys are coming from in this area. Julian, you obviously work from a professional point of view in many ways with emotions. Would you like to say a little bit about yourself and about what you do? And yeah, please share your thoughts and feelings about men and emotions.
Yeah, thank you. First, Calm People are emotional resilience specialists, and what we do is we go into organisations of all shapes and sizes, and we run emotional resilience programs helping people remain emotionally strong. And one of the subjects that we touch on, and it's interesting that we only touch on it, but we do. We probably spend out of the day, we might spend half an hour, is talking about feelings. And the interesting thing for me, I was in a workshop yesterday where we talked about feelings, and at the end of it, and people sitting there going, wow, and I'm saying, yeah, this half an hour may be for a couple of you the most important half an hour you've spent for a long time. And heads were nodding around the room. And I said, but actually, if I told you you were being invited on a workshop to discuss your feelings, how many of you would have turned up? And they all went, we wouldn't. You know, and it's that thing about that ability to understand and connect with and talk about our feelings is such a difficult subject. I'm really lucky because for me, I get to do it in my work. What I try to do in order to be authentic about my work is I try to make sure that I do an appropriate level of connecting with my own feelings and allowing those to exist as well, so that when I'm talking about those, I'm not just teaching and saying do as I say, I'm doing as I do. So everything I teach to people, I try to practice on myself.
I have to say, I think we learn far more by example than by the things that we're told. I think you could probably stop anyone in the street and say to them, do you think it's a good thing to bottle your feelings up? And I would say probably 99.9%, probably 100% of people would say, no, definitely, we really shouldn't bottle our feelings up. But put them in a position where you're asking them to actually share their feelings. And I think that we just feel so vulnerable around sharing ourselves in that way. And actually, I do think we learn far more by example. In many ways, it's why I'm having these conversations, particularly with guys, because I think as women, we are often, I think we're more allowed, or we feel more allowed to be a bit more emotional. Even if we feel criticized for it, we still feel more okay about revealing our feelings and our emotions. I think guys receive really mixed messages around emotions, actually.
Yeah, we do, and it's all about the fact that we need to perform a backflip emotionally, because we think that to be vulnerable is to be weak. And actually what I've learned over the years is that to be able to acknowledge my vulnerability, allow myself to have a relationship with it that I can work with rather than deny it, actually makes me a far stronger person than actually the person who just puts their head down, says if I ignore it, it'll go away, and then plows on regardless. And the message I always want to give anybody I'm with and I'm working with is that if you have that, I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to plow on regardless, and I'm going to deny and suppress my feelings, then actually what will happen is at some point you'll get to a point in your life where you'll have to stop. Things will grind to a halt. You'll get to a crisis point in your life, and it'll all go wrong. And it'll be because you've not been dealing with the feelings of vulnerability that we're all exposed to every day of our lives.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think lots of people, we do kind of things like anger management courses for people who kind of pop, and we're dealing with lots of depression in the world and anxiety where people are suppressing feelings. My experience, which is, really resonates with what you're saying, is that if we deny our emotions, then they stack up. And I think we tend to then go one of two ways. They either burst outwards and are expressed outwardly, often inappropriately, or they're turned inwards and are expressed inwardly inappropriately. Either way, there's a massive outcome. It's almost as though there's a residue that's built up over time. And it sort of interests me that sometimes something quite small or seemingly insignificant will come along, and it will be the straw that broke the camel's back, because we've stacked up so much over over a period of time. Something tiny will come along, and the emotional response isn't relevant or appropriate to that event. And then people get terribly worried, because they think, well, there's something really wrong with me. I've become so emotionally intense over something that really should be quite small and insignificant. In reality, it's because they have stacked up these feelings and emotions over such a long period of time without listening to themselves. And then along comes something, and they get the whole package. They don't just get the feelings that are relevant in that moment. They get the 50 things or the 500 things that previously they've not actually responded to themselves appropriately over. And it panics people, because they get such an intense reaction. When you begin to unravel and unpick that process, and you enable them to connect with themselves, to listen to themselves, and to become, I'm going to say, emotionally fluent with themselves, it's incredibly life-changing.
I absolutely agree, and that bit about the residue building up and the straw that breaks the camel's back. I think what a lot of us do then, of course, is when we're in that intensely emotional system where the dam has broken and we're flooded with emotion and feelings. Part of our brain sits there and goes, see, that's what I've been telling you to avoid all along. That's why you need to deny your feelings. That's why you don't need to go anywhere near these. So we have an immense job to do with people to help them understand that if they can just have that fluent relationship with their feelings and emotions, that these sort of things don't have to happen. Yes, moments of pain and hurt and sorrow come along on a day-by-day basis, but if we allow those to be there rather than pushing them away and just stacking them up, we don't have to feel this.
You've raised a fabulously important point, which I hope will really benefit people listening to these conversations, which is the way that we interpret that information. If we've stacked up our emotions and then suddenly we, as you say, the dam bursts, it can feel so overwhelming that we use that experience to reinforce the original perception, which was, this is why we avoid emotions like the plague, this is why we don't do emotions. And of course, all that's going to happen is that we shut down, we find ways of avoiding what's actually happened. We don't actually process the experience. We reinforce it, and then of course eventually the same cycle will happen again. And not only that, but we will be fearful of it happening again. Whereas, you know, as we both know, if we are able to develop that language, that emotional fluency, it's so life-changing, because our emotions are giving us information. As you say, the ups and downs. I again find it really fascinating when people come and see me and they're in a real state because something really huge has happened in their life, and yet they're sort of sitting there saying, how can I stop feeling this? And I'm thinking, well, if you weren't feeling this, I would have every alarm bell ringing, because this has happened and this has happened and this has happened. It's a completely natural response, and actually your emotions are saying to you, you need to slow down, you need to listen, you need to take time out and attend to yourself, because actually big things are happening in your world. And so they're a real indicator of when we need a greater amount of self-care, and they're a good indicator, I guess. They're giving us that sort of signposts all along the way, I think, in terms of what we need to do in any given moment.
And even what we need to do is just stop and be there, or whether we do need to take some action to defend ourselves or to stand up for ourselves or whatever it might be. But they're really, really useful pieces of information. But
I think I sometimes use the term that they're a call to action, even if the action is non-action.
Right.
You know, even if the call to action, as you said, is to stop and take time out. But you're right, they very often are. They are requiring something of us. You know, they're letting us know something. And you're quite right. It could be stop, take time out right now, or it could be stand up for yourself. It could be, you know, whatever the response is, something is needed.
Yeah. And I think the sort of almost the final layer of that is because we're so good at denying them, that when we are getting the messages, we're not very good at reading them. Whereas if we develop that fluency with them, then as those messages come in day by day, we are not only more accepting of them, but we understand them better and we know what they mean. Whereas, you know, people, you know, how I don't know how many people I've worked with where they will say, well, my partner will describe me as not being in touch with my feelings at all. I don't even know what a feeling is. And they said, yeah, and they're absolutely right. You don't, because you've been pushing away for so long. But when they do come in, you don't really know what they mean. All you know is that they hurt.
Yes, so all associations tend to be negative. And of course you're right, because when we do listen to those emotions, if that means we need to take time out and stop, or we need to, you know, take whatever action we need to, we're navigating life from a very different position when we are in tune with the information that our emotions are giving us.
So the other that pops into my mind then, of course, is that if I'm in that state where I don't really understand the messages my feelings are giving me because I've been denying them for so long, then when I think I'm happy, am I really happy? Or am I actually just relieved because maybe I don't feel quite so much pain recently?
Yeah.
So it's that the bonus is that if I can develop that healthy relationship with my feelings and emotions, when I feel happy, I will genuinely know I'm happy, rather than it just being a feeling of I'm not as scared as I was earlier.
Yes, absolutely. So we begin to define not just the more challenging emotions, but actually we define the really good ones as well. And again, you know, if we're on our journey of life, it's so valuable to discover those things that genuinely make us happy, as opposed to, as you said, just periods of time where we feel less under pressure. And those are worlds apart. And if we don't understand emotions, I guess we miss the information from the really easier ones, the more joyful ones, as well as the more challenging ones.
Exactly, yeah. And so by filtering out the challenging ones, we're possibly missing out on some really, really great feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, I've always thought we're rubbish as human beings at being selective emotionally. I think if we shut down the ones we don't want, we end up missing out on a whole load of things that we do want at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. 100% agreement.
Julian, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. I think you've really opened up a fabulous line of conversation that I hope will benefit anyone listening. In terms of the kind of work you do, how can people find you if they're interested in you coming into their organisation, for example, running workshops, giving seminars? How do people get in touch with you?
Okay, so we have a website which is calmpeople.co.uk, and that I guess if you get there, it's got all the information you need. We run a few open workshops for individuals, and then we have a whole range of stuff that we do mainly organisations, but we do work with individuals if they're local and they want our help as well.
Perfect. That's absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much. And I hope, I presume that we will be adding the links to your website on our resources page in the A to Z library. So anyone watching this on the library, if you go to the resources page, you will find a direct link to Julian's website. So Julian from the Calm People, thank you so much. It's been a fabulous conversation.
Thank you, Jenny. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me in.
You're welcome.